Hi everyone, welcome to Scottish Summit 2021. I'm Chirag Patel. I'm excited to be here with you presenting a session on Administrator's Guide to Managing Microsoft 365 and Collaboration Workloads. My big thanks to Mark Christie, the event team, and the volunteers for making this event happen and for their incredible energy and efforts over the last few months. This event wouldn't have been possible without them. But also my thanks to the sponsors for supporting us, in particular the media streaming support, as well as other areas of the conference. So please feel free to explore their websites for their products and services that might help solve your problems. So what we're going to cover in this session is really the practical areas of how to best manage and the configurations around Microsoft 365 and other services. So we'll start by looking at the overview and some of the admin center capabilities, but also we'll dip and dive into security and compliance, which pretty much touches all the workloads of Teams, Yammer, and SharePoint. But also we will finish off the session with some few tips and suggestions around the adoption and support to get the best out of Microsoft 365. So I'm Chirag Patel, live and work in London, UK, work with Patel Consulting, delivering secure collaboration and productivity solutions through Microsoft 365, Teams, and Power Platform, as well as SharePoint. But I'm also a Microsoft MVP in Office apps and services for my contributions in mainly speaking at various community events, albeit these days online around the world. But also I'm a certified architect as well as Microsoft 365 admin expert, just to really keep up with all the learnings and the ever-changing landscape for Microsoft 365 tech. And I also organize and run Microsoft 365 UK user group and host monthly events, mainly on Wednesdays, middle of the month, covering a wide range of topics on Microsoft 365. So also grateful to some of the events that I've spoken to over the years. And so you'll find on my blog site, techchirag.com, with all the recordings and slides from past sessions as well, that hopefully might be useful to you. So what is Microsoft 365? And it really falls down into three areas of Windows 10, Microsoft 365 online services such as SharePoint, Teams, Yammer, which is the main focus of this session, but also some of the other capabilities around the enterprise mobility and security in order to manage your devices and apps and protect them from not just corporate devices but also from personal devices as well. And so when you carve out Microsoft 365 services, it kind of really falls in this kind of areas in my view, in terms of the collaboration, both internal and external, but also the document management and also project management and project business applications through the use of Power Platform. And so when you look into implementing some of the areas and whether that's looking after your contracts or agreements or other aspects of your projects, large-scale projects, whatever that is, then your services essentially should be designed around that and being able to then wrap that with the governance in terms of the service management, as well as being able to control and policies that enable which features to roll out and which ones not to, so that you can actually have a fully configured, tailor-made solutions for your various services on that, and really kind of just add that up to your collaboration and productivity experiences through the use of various tech pieces that we have within the Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 Admin Center obviously comes with so many cards depending on what role and roles you have and the teams that looks after various aspects of Microsoft 365. But in particular, when you look at, say, security and compliance, then some of those cards have got indicators in terms of if things are classified, say with GDPR, for example, or in some areas that may need some attention, that may give you some status snapshots if you got information around credit cards stored in your systems that may not be protected fully. So those sort of things will light up through your admin cards, and also point you to various admin centers that will give you then more further details, all within the Microsoft 365 admin center. But when you look at the kind of some of the key areas of Microsoft 365, the setup screen is very useful, because not only it gives you kind of a at a glance snapshot view some of the things that you've switched on, and you may be already indicated by the green lights there, for example, but also being able to then kind of drill into those individual areas that needs attention, and therefore you'll get at a glance information around what the actual in this case GDPR related info is, the end user impact, but also being able to then switch things on so that you can actually kind of make sure that you're able to implement some of those things, and in some cases some of those things may require more configuration, and also being able to then go into that individual admin center for more detailed configuration. But this kind of setup screen is always up to date, and so it changes depending on what else you may roll out in your Microsoft 365. Deployment advisors or setup guides is another area which kind of gives you a quick way to deploy various services, and there's a whole raft of them as well. And so we'll look at a specific ones here just to kind of give you a flavor of what that wizard looks like, but again you have various options to explore and be able to then configure as and when your journey continues with the implementation of Microsoft 365. So let's take a look, and if I come to my admin center here, so this is a fictitious company, Contoso Electronics, and so on my left, if I go into my setup area, and we had a look at earlier in terms of the GDPR info, for example, you can classify, so there's that the screens there you have. So again, I can just go into each of those areas, but again, if I go back to my home screen, then go into customized setup guidance. So here then I've got various advisors, if you like, or guides that's set up. So there's the initial setup lots here, so things like rolling out Microsoft Edge, or even setting up Microsoft Search, authentication and access areas, security and compliance, not just from infrastructure perspective, but also from a information protection perspective for various assets and SharePoint or Teams, and then also you got collaboration guides. So if you haven't rolled out Teams properly, for example, you do require SharePoint, of course, with that, as well as other elements. So again, you can go through these wizards and kind of drive things forward. So let's pick one, and if I pick the information protection setup guide there, then what that basically gives me is that a set of wizard which I can go through, and obviously this is the one that I did earlier on, but if I was to step back to the first page, then essentially kind of gives me what the overview is, what some of the actions I can take, in this case the Content Explorer, which can basically help me to understand what is the state of my data, and being able to then work out things in terms of where things are, but also being able to then go into further classification and protection in sensitivity labels. So we'll look at that a bit more detail later on, but also various elements of DLP, sensitive information types that I can define, which there are tons of them available within the Microsoft 365. And then I can just click next there as well, and then obviously get started through that. So obviously in this case, audit logging is enabled. If it wasn't, then obviously it will flag that up, because if you're a new tenant, then that's not switched on by default. So again, there's little tips that can help you along the way to switch things on. And then obviously from here, it just tells me what the next steps are in order to not just monitor it, but also being able to view some of those analytics and so forth. So I can kind of switch things on through this set of guides, and then also being able to then come back in the future and switch on other areas as well. So, with that, you can then see on the right hand side, it gives you kind of a progress status that if you do use the wizard, then it'll kind of keep up to date in terms of where the progress is. So if I scroll down again, then I can see a few of those things are still in progress, and when I was trying that earlier on. So good way to look at your deployment setup guides as well. So in terms of the security and compliance policies, and yes, some of these are obvious in terms of your IT that will kind of help protect some of those things. But in most cases, you should have written down policy statements, not just a generic information security policies, but really having kind of a specific policies that's tailored not just maybe to all the staff, but potentially maybe even the guests or external users. And so you have policies here which are categorized in the areas of identity, devices, information in SharePoint, Teams, etc., but also your cloud apps as well. So again, that journey may look different depending on how much time you need, and also being able to then educate your users how best to make use of those policy enforcements that you have, that they can understand, so that the right policies can be put in place. And so conditional access policies is the way that kind of helps you achieve that, not just purely from setting up your MFA for your staff and admins, but also being able to manage your other devices, your apps, as well as being able to also control access to your information in SharePoint and Teams through the use of conditional access policies. So really kind of bringing all those signals together depending on if it's a particular device or application or any particular locations, but also then being able to formulate that kind of decision making in terms of what controls are managed, in terms of what you can grant or block access to specific resources, and really kind of having that enforcement, if you like, to then say, okay, in order to access a particular resource, you have to provide your MFA, being able to then grant or even block some of the areas depending on your sign-in risks as well, and everything else. So there's a whole raft of options in there in order to kind of manage that. So let's look at that conditional access policies in terms of how best to do that. Now, again, in Azure AD, this is the place where you will manage your conditional access policies. You can, of course, go into a endpoint manager as well if you wanted to leverage your device and app protection policies. Again, those conditional access policies are the same. They just make it appear as a view in endpoint manager as well as over here as well. So if you go ahead and create a new policy, and so I've got a few options here to configure, mainly what we spoke about just now in terms of those signals and decisions. So here we'll give a name to a policy to say block access to guests, and this could be to a specific applications depending on what that policy is. So we'll give that a name. We can pick our users. In this case, we can either pick all or select users, and this could be even your teams or associated sites, SharePoint sites that there is. So you can pick and choose some of those groups, or simply just choose all guests and external users. So you can see there's an option there as well. So if you wanted to have access policies for your global admins or other administrators, then you can set up those policies to target those specific roles. But again, if you move on further, then you got cloud apps and actions. So in here, you can then say you can target all the cloud apps, or maybe select specific apps as well, such as maybe say Office 365, which basically may target all your OneDrive, SharePoint, as well as other apps and services inside your Office 365. So again, I've seen instances where admins will usually target just the SharePoint, which is available as a separate app. But if you want to target the whole Office 365 space, then really this is the app to select. And then you can choose your conditions in terms of how to kind of analyze those decisions based once the user logs in. So, again, I won't go through each and every one of those, but key ones are things like the user risk. Again, if you have, risk levels depending on how many times they've logged in, or, kind of incorrectly creating that high risk situation, then you can kind of control the user risk. But also you got sign-in risk, and then you got device platforms. Again, you can pick and choose if it's all the devices on any platforms or a specific one. And with every one of these actions, you can exclude as well, so that you can actually have that flexibility to either bypass those policies depending on the specific requirements. And then you got your locations, if you got like your office networks and things like that you want to exclude. But here's the one that you can actually configure to say that, if the guest accesses any information on my tenant, then I just want them to use the browser. I don't want them to use mobile applications or desktop clients as well. So, and then you got some of the legacy auth clients in there as well. So you got greater flexibility there in order to then set up that conditional access policies. And then you have your options here to either have this switched on in the report only mode and kind of monitor to see how that's working. At the same time, use the opportunity to educate the users in terms of what that effect will look like for their guests. And then you can just switch it on, and then you've got your enforcement kind of happening for that policy. And you can end up having 10, 15, 20, or depending on the scale of your organization, and have various policies set up, mainly to reflect those suggested policy statements in the previous slide, in order to make sure that this is aligned with that. And the major area for security and compliance, obviously up until now, we had just the one admin center there for security and compliance, but now you got two separate centers, one for security and one for compliance. Compliance is the major one here, because not only being able to look at the score and work out what the posture is for your security and compliance, but also being able to make sure that you're able to walk away with the confidence that you have your actions and improvement actions in place as well. So it's not just a tool for IT, but also for the compliance managers or information security managers to be really able to manage and look at the state of the data within that as well. And kind of this gives you an overview of what the security and compliance center looks like, and some of the customization you can do in order to control those menu options that may be specific to your needs. So we look at the compliance manager, and this is the key part. And I generally find that either organizations have got separate repositories or different ways of managing their compliance processes and the documents that goes with it. But this is very powerful because this used to be called Compliance Core for some of those folks who might be familiar with this. But essentially you get a set of pre-built custom templates that target specific regulations. So whether that's ISO 27001 and or GDPR and so on, but also it's got that workflow engine built in terms of being able to assign actions and also being able to then manage subsequent documents or evidence for test items and anything relating to that specific task. So all that is all contained within this compliance manager, and then being able to obviously being able to then comply, being able to then study the information that's available, that's up to date, all inside that specific task actions. So let's take a look what that looks like. So if I go into my compliance manager, which is part of the Microsoft 365 compliance, so I've got various tabs at the top over here. So I've got first of all, I've got 75% compliance score, and that's mainly from Microsoft perspective, which you can see here, that's 12,000 odd points. And then you've got me as an organization that's got only 37. And so there is that potential and the opportunity to improve the score, but obviously the goal is not to get 100%. So you want to make sure that you're protected enough with the necessary actions. So if I go into improvement actions, then I've got various actions that will be organized by solutions such as Teams, SharePoint, and so forth, but also being able to look at some of the statuses for those actions, if it's not been assessed or not even started, or even if it's failed. So In this case, I've got two actions relating to SharePoint. So the first one is to do with enable versioning for document libraries. But if I come out of that filter and then go and pick, let's pick DLP, for example. And then obviously with the DLP side of things, I've got a few things in there. So there's a few policies there. And if I go into create DLP policies for personally identifiable information, then I'll get a kind of a detail around that specific action in which I can assign that task, as I mentioned earlier, but also being able to then get the visibility around the status of that task. So once that loads up, there it is. Okay. So you can see on the left hand side, I've got my overview of what the current status of things are. In this case, I've got the task assigned to Megan, but on the right hand side, I've got various tabs around the implementation detail steps, how to do it. I can of course change the status depending on where I am in that journey, put a date against it, but also gives me very useful info and insight around that in terms of what it is and how I can get further information as well, and also being able to add implementation notes all within this compliance manager task. So I got that, and then I got obviously the testing, like with everything else you want to test and make sure that there's evidence and to support that. So you can put all that information within here, and then you have documents again. So these are relating to your specific actions. So as the action goes, and there are hundreds of these actions, in which case, all this information is tied up to each of those actions. So you can get basically full control around the management of complying your policies and everything else. So definitely worth spending time to understand more on Compliance Manager. So sensitivity labels has been around for some time, and recently, what went into GA is the ability to be able to classify the entire SharePoint site or even Microsoft Teams chat space. And so not only you're able to classify your files and emails, but also being able to then support that further by encrypting, content marking, and auto labeling and all these other wonderful feature sets, but also being able to then still leverage your existing functionalities that you were able to do with sensitivity labels, assigning permissions and user access to those content that expires, and all that granularity of controls. So you have a way to then publish that label to a specific areas of the Teams and SharePoint workloads, and then being able to manage furthermore through the external sharing or guest access, whether any particular item can be shared or not. So let's take a look at that. So if I come into, again, Microsoft 365 compliance and information protection area is where I can control my sensitivity labels. So I've got a few labels set up here, but I'll look at the confidential project, which is something that I set up. And again, the objective for this label is really just to classify at that container level. So there are a few things before this can appear in your environment. Is firstly to be able to enable that labeling, and there are some PowerShell scripts. You can check on my blog site techchirag.com. There's a session that I did on understanding security and compliance in Microsoft Teams, and there's a PowerShell script there. You can then actually pick that up and be able to run that in your environment and be able to choose which labels to publish for that. So in this case, I'll step through the wizard. So for this particular label, I've called it confidential project. Again, the scope is for groups and sites, not for files and emails. This is grayed out because obviously I haven't chosen my files. And then here I'm choosing in terms of that protection settings. So again, this is for me to be able to control that the level of access that I have will have to label Teams and Microsoft 365 groups. So that's the one area for it. The second part I might switch it on is being able to then control that device access and external sharing settings as well, based on that Teams classification that I do. So I'll get more options based on these two settings. And the first option is more around that what kind of teams or SharePoint sites or even that associated Microsoft 365 group I want to control. So for this label, I'm saying that I want to be able to choose just for the private team and not be able to have the ability for somebody to create a public team space or even or any other type of team based on that label. And then I've got that little option there in terms of Microsoft group owners being able to add people outside the group because it's a private content that I have for this confidential project. So in this case, I don't want to switch that on so that they can't share any content within that teams to external folks. And then I've got the external sharing and device access. So again, I can control external sharing from labeled SharePoint sites in terms of that I can have my specific SharePoint site that I can say that if for this label, I can't have anyone even select anyone or existing guests. I can just say, make it only for people in the organization. So all the content in SharePoint for this label will only be available internally. And then I can say, if I do want to allow unmanaged devices, because I could have my personal device, for example, accessing this tenant, then I may want to just say, allow limited web only access to it if it was for this particular content. So I've got those kind of various granularity and functions that I can organize with that. And then once I've done that, I can just go ahead and save that label, publish it, and then it becomes available after a short period of time in my team. So I'm going to cancel that and go over to team. And then if I now create my new team from scratch, I can use my templates if I wanted to. And I've got this label enabled here. So I've got two of them. One of them is the one that I'm interested in, is confidential project. And so within that, I get the option to only just create private team chat space. I don't even get the option to even be able to create that as well. So if I hover on the public team space, then I get this sensitivity does not allow creation of public teams. So in that case, that's pretty much what I get with that confidential project, and then be able to then create my team and kind of have that collaboration efforts going on. So very quick way of kind of looking through your sensitivity labels. And then, we kind of went through the wizard in terms of what you can do. One thing to bear in mind is a lot of the content that we have, it is obviously all part of Microsoft 365 group, which comes with its own mailbox, its own security group membership that controls access to not only SharePoint, but also the Teams area as well in terms of your owners, members, and in various channels that you have. But these are some of the dependencies that you have, so that if you do create a team or even if you create a plan, it will go and create a Microsoft 365 group as well as being able to take advantage of other services in Microsoft 365 and Power Platform, so such as Power BI Workspace that you can have set up for the existing team that you already have. So with SharePoint, a number of capabilities that you have for many years now. Yes, every SharePoint site is associated as part of your Microsoft Teams, and you can go a step further to manage that SharePoint site by introducing things like document libraries to kind of lock down, control your, for example, like your contracts and agreements, and have put tailored permissions on that. But also being able to create lists as well as Microsoft lists that you now have, which is built on SharePoint list, and being able to then format the views and keeping track of things. So you might have complaints or application trackers or any kind of information, and then subsequently customize that using Power Apps or even Power Automate to introduce some process workflows and things like that in order to kind of bring the richness out of your SharePoint site, and using web parts on pages really enhances that experience by putting things like the calendar or planner plan, or even if it's a project status report, being able to build that page very quickly using the page templates and being able to serve those pages inside Microsoft Teams tabs, if you like. So again, SharePoint comes in that flavors, and you can have various hub sites that you can group various SharePoint sites to be able to have that controlled navigation and search experiences all unified within that SharePoint hub site. But the key part here to kind of take into account here is that the guest access experience you get with Microsoft Teams is completely separate to what you get in SharePoint. So whilst the default is that you get access to everything in SharePoint from Teams guest access, but you may have some scenarios where, for example, if you have a specific document library that needs to remain confidential, in that case, you may decide to do things differently and lock things down further by having this capability for external sharing in SharePoint to make sure that at the platform level, you can't have anyone sharing any content to anybody, but also you can then step down into individual SharePoint sites and being able to then control the external sharing for just that specific site to those options that you have. So yeah, kind of worth spending time on that just to make sure that your SharePoint sites are not shared externally, because by default the team sites are externally shareable. So if that's not what you want, then you need to come into SharePoint Admin Center and switch that off. Okay, and so with the group membership site security side of things is fairly kind of simple in the sense that group membership is the preferred way of doing it, but obviously you have then the option to make sure that if within the SharePoint site security you want to then kind of lock that down, then you can actually make sure that only site owners, for example, can share content and not the members of the team as well. So again, site sharing is the separate permissions you get inside the SharePoint site. Then, of course, with all the external sharing and guest access that happens, then you want to make sure that you're able to then monitor guests effectively. So this is within Azure Active Directory, and it's an Azure Premium 2 feature, so in license-wise. So, it's a good way to kind of control that, but also making sure that, you're able to select specific teams or groups in order to then manage that guest access reviews altogether. So let's take a look at that. So if I come into my Azure Admin, external identities area, so then within here, I can then go into access reviews. And so I'll create my new access review. So I got two options. Either I can create teams, groups, or application reviews. So we'll pick teams and groups, and then specifically I can choose a group in here. So I can say maybe sales and marketing. So I can pick those, or I can just pick all the groups, which is in preview, coming soon, hopefully. So then if I go in there and select that group and scroll down, then I can say, do I want to just review the guests, or do I want to have all the users monitored in that? So again, I can just click next and say only the guests. Pick my reviewers. I might pick the group owners, but I have options there to have based on who I want to pick, and then also being able to pick the frequency of that review as well. So in this case, I might do that quarterly, and then pick my options around the dates as to how long that goes on for. So once I've kind of done that, then I can say what kind of things actions I require from that review. So do I need justification? Do I need email notifications? All those things, so that at least that review is then set up and then kind of maintains regularly, and being able to then monitor as part of your processes. So once you've kind of done with what you're happy with it, give a name to the review, and then you're kind of done with that program in place to review your guests in this case. So Microsoft Teams side of things is the best part of everyone's day that we spend on that, and a number of ways of kind of going through this. But in this day and age now, it's not about SharePoint side or a team chat space. I like to call it collaboration space, because you get Teams, SharePoint, everything with it anyways, but it just makes it easier from a user perspective to be able to work with that team. And then as a platform goes, obviously depending on where you are in your journey, to kind of accelerate that adoption further, you can then start rolling out other capabilities around the voice and the phone systems and so forth. But again, you got a whole raft of policies in Microsoft Teams that you can control, and we'll take a look at a few of them. But the main ones are the team settings and the apps that you want to possibly control in terms of what gets rolled out to the users. So here's my Teams admin center here. In terms of what I can do particularly is things like create, manage update policies. So something recently that been rolled out is being able to receive some of the previews, some of the new features that we get in Teams. So again, you may want to restrict that to a specific set of users by applying policies. So in this case, for your as a global policy, it's on, so you may want to turn that off and just have that on for few users so that they can preview those features. You've got team templates, so here you get a sample of collection of all the templates that you get, and you're able to create your own templates, add your own channels to it, and also tie up some of the apps as well. So it takes some time, but obviously then those templates do become available for your users to use. So a great way to have a look at those Teams templates in there as well. And then you've got things around Teams apps as well. So being able to manage apps, so you can then either allow or block those apps, but also being able to then have permission policies on those apps as well. So if I go into my global app global policy here, I can maybe say that only allow Microsoft apps, but perhaps block all the apps from the third-party providers. So you have that kind of flexibility across all the teams. They can put that in place, those policies, and also have some kind of setup policies as well, so that not only you have your default on the app rail bar on the left-hand side of your Teams client, but you're able to then add more apps if you like within that as well. So in this case, I've got my activity chat Teams calendar, which is normally what you get in your default Teams client, but I've added my new app here, tasks by planner and to do as well. So you can add more apps, and then your app rail bar can be accessed by all your users or that specific users if you wanted to as well. And so quickly on the guest access, something recently is obviously guest access is now on. So if you haven't configured already, or that might be already on, so if you do want to switch it off, then this is the place to come here, so that for all your teams, your guest access can be controlled through on-off switch. But also you got areas of calling and meeting and messaging side of things in terms of what they can, what they can't do. So you may not want them to edit their sent messages or even delete them, in which case you may turn those things off. So you have that flexibility in terms of what the guest can or can't do. And then obviously you got your individual settings inside the teams as well. So that's kind of, if you like, a very quick run through on the Teams admin. And a lot of these, if you like, what we've seen so far is all through the admin centers, configuration, everything else. For some of the most recurring tasks, if you like, you'll obviously want to use PowerShell. These are some of the modules that that you will use in your day-to-day tasks. Being able to draw up the list of your SharePoint sites and find out perhaps maybe which ones are externally shared, and specifically who are the external users inside that SharePoint site, all the way to using something like the open source PNP, Pattern and Practices PowerShell, which is a great team of community who actually make our lives easier to be able to bring some of those commandlets to get things done very quickly compared to the out-of-the-box PowerShell commandlets you get in, say, SharePoint, for example. And then from a Yammer perspective, something that you may not have rolled out initially, but if you do, then it's a great tool for company-wide collaboration, being able to set up various types of communities and having that all kinds of social as well as project conversations and everything else, and really tap into each other's expertise, being able to exchange ideas across Yammer. But again, various admins there, and you have the Yammer communities itself connected to Microsoft 365 groups. So the point there is that you can only have either Yammer group or Microsoft Teams chat space. So any teams you've got, you can't have Yammer for that. So something to bear in mind. And then, of course, to bring everything around Microsoft 365, something you have from lookbook.microsoft.com is one of the solutions of deploying a SharePoint site that has got all the ready-made content packs available for all your Microsoft 365 services, but also you're able to add your own custom learning content in there as well. So really make that one-stop shop to be able to get your users, new and existing users, onboarded and be able to train them up very quickly and easily to learn about Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and so forth. And of course, the biggest challenge is to try and keep up with everything and also being able to plan the things in your journey for rolling things out. So, subscribe to Roadmap and, with updates you get, but also the blogs and articles around the Microsoft tech community and Microsoft 365 is daily basis, a lot of feeds that come out. So it's the only way I personally, anyway, like many others, stay up to date with Microsoft 365. And then, of course, you want to be make sure that you have the supported team with certifications, and also being able to make sure that the platform is configured and looked after in the best interest as possible. And so there are various certifications as well they can take, and obviously the elective one there is either one of those on the left hand side, or if you're already MCSE productivity, then you can take that and take further 2 exams, being able to then qualify as an admin. But it's a huge amount of content to learn there to be able to then succeed in your role as the Microsoft 365 Enterprise Admin. So with that, just like to say big thanks once again to Mark Christie and the team and the volunteers for making this happen, and the sponsors too. And feel free to connect with me on techchirag.com. But I'll be keeping an eye on the questions now and on the chat, and then obviously I'll try and respond to you as quickly as possible. Apart from that, thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the event.